Welcome everyone to Just Onside. I am your host Ahmed Badio Baghdadi, and I am joined by two of my boys who are currently not doing so hot right now. Ayu Patel and Uwais Ahmed. How are we doing, gents? Before we take a deep dive into what's
Yeah,
transpired.
I'm doing good. Ayub's looking much better than our previous episode, but no, I'm doing well. Difficult result on Sunday. I'm sure we'll dive into it, but yeah, I'm okay for the most part.
By the grace and the blessings of the Almighty, I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. Wasn't too clever over the weekend. Leeds have not done me any favours at all, but I wasn't expecting any.
It was interesting because
Oh,
I think was it the last episode where I said you'll just about recover and then Leeds will play Liverpool and they'll probably send you into another boat.
Yeah. I mean, it was. Thankfully, I think I was a realist, and I knew that we weren't going to get a result. I weren't expecting a drubbing, but I weren't expecting a result. But all good, all good.
wow, we've got our brave faces on today. I like it, gents. I like it.
inside.
Yeah. But kicking off the show today. But before we continue, make sure you like, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. Hit the bell for our next video. Um, and yeah, tell your friends about Just On Side. I don't know how to segue from there. Anyways, boys, we're moving to the big game on the weekend. Well, the big result on the weekend, shall we say? Arsenal away to West Ham, starting the game looking amazingly comfortable, no sign of nerves. Take a 2-0 lead early on, playing some beautiful, beautiful football, and then again, much like the previous week, they fumble the bag and West Ham come back into it and get a 2-2 draw. What do we feel about this result? In particular, Uwais, given you're an Arsenal fan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think about this result, how damaging it could be in terms of the title race and just the performance in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we look at the week before against Liverpool, there was a lot of talk after the game that, was it 2 points dropped? Was it a point gained? And I took the view that ultimately these type of results in football in Premier League, when you're playing against the big teams away from home down the stretch, it's going to happen. You cannot win every game. They'd won 7 on the bounce. So a draw, in the end, it is what it is. And you try and go on from that and try and recover. I think when you look at the West Ham game, as you rightly mentioned, Badge, there in the introduction, it was a game they really needed to win. And they really needed to, obviously, the idea was to beat West Ham, to beat Southampton heading into the Etihad game against Man City for that blockbuster. They start off really well in the game, and there was nothing in the first 10 to 12, 15 minutes that would suggest anything but a comfortable Arsenal win. I've seen this performance from Arsenal many times away from home. They gain control of the ball, they move up the thirds naturally, they pen the team in, and then it's getting in behind in the final third. Let's look at both goals. If you look at kind of the move for the first goal, Partey into Odegaard into White across the goal for an empty net to the far post. The second goal, similar cross at the far post. Odegaard lovely slices it through Fabianski's legs, I believe. The type of goals that they were scoring, like they've done many a time, the Fulham away performance comes to mind, is one where they're getting in behind. It's always a sign of a team in unbelievable attacking form, let's say, when you can consistently get in behind. There were a couple of things, however, there afterwards, which I cannot explain as to why it happened. West Ham was showing no sign of any attacking potency whatsoever. I remember watching their game at home to Newcastle, and I remember speaking to both of you about how Newcastle simply just took them apart by making them kind of huge gaps everywhere in the entire pitch. And you've got to think about it. You're 2-0 from a West Ham perspective, you're 2-0 down. It's 15, 20 minutes gone at home. You're fighting relegation. Let's have a think about what the mindset is. The mindset is going to be quite conservative, quite anxious, in the sense of, hey, let's not get embarrassed here. It could be 3-4 at half time in front of our home fans. You've got probably the defensive midfielders, Rice and Susek, probably having to be conservative in their positioning to try and really protect that back line. So you're well placed as long as you keep that intensity up in terms of what's got you those first 2 goals. And there was a moment straight after the 2-0 goal where Odegaard tries to play Jesus through, and I think there was a sliding challenge from the centre-back. Again, anxiety, those kind of negative situations you find yourself when you're sliding, last-ditch challenge just to avoid Jesus going through on goal once more. It was all set up for Arsenal simply just to keep up that intensity. I don't believe in necessarily making inroads into the goal difference. I think you simply want to just get the 3 points. But for whatever reason, there was this kind of shift in the first half for no reason whatsoever, where Jesus started to consistently drop deep into not just midfield, but into defence, which I found really interesting. And I remember remarking and sending a text to my friend saying, I don't understand why he's dropping so deep. And Jamie Carragher mentioned this yesterday on Monday Night Football in the analysis. What I can't understand is that during the game, Jamie Carragher, who was covering it, was talking about how Jesus is the best player on the pitch, and he's really helping Arsenal in terms of covering kind of keeping possession. But I didn't understand what the need was. That's the point. If you've got a team under the pump, and they're probably thinking simply in conservative terms, which is, let's not let this get embarrassing before half time. I don't understand what Jesus was trying to fix by dropping so deep. It wasn't as if West Ham were slowly applying any pressure. There was nothing. There was absolutely nothing offered by West Ham. Yet Jesus, an unbelievable play. I'm not criticising him. It's just when I saw it happening in the game, I thought this is going to give a license for 2 things. One, for the West Ham defenders to slightly push up because they've got nobody really threatening in behind. Martinelli and Saka seem to obviously keep positional discipline wide. And secondly, Rice and Soucek can obviously go up 5-10 yards because, again, they don't have to protect that middle area, which was so vulnerable in the first 15-20 minutes. And it's quite poignant when you think about it, that's where the penalty came from. It came from Rice being able to apply pressure on Partey. Big mistake from Partey, but it can happen. But that's my point. It allowed West Ham to be able to simply just move up the pitch. And they didn't necessarily have to do anything for it because Arsenal volunteered and gave up that space voluntarily. So that was a little bit frustrating, and I could see it happening as it happened. Now, Arsenal gave a penalty at the Emirates against West Ham. They've got a penchant for giving away penalties in difficult situations. But yeah, you give the penalty away and it's all of a sudden a different game. The crowd's into it. It's 2-1. You're in a battle. And that's why it was such a difficult game to explain when, if you'd watched the first 15-20 minutes, you'd think, I mean, Badger, even you remarked, I remember on our text forum saying, well, that's that. And to most objective observers, they would think, well, there is that. So at halftime, 2-1, you come out for the second half, you get an early reprieve in terms of the penalty incident. I thought it was a little harsh, to be fair. It was quite close. I know what the rules are about the arms being away from the body and the silhouette and what have you. I just thought it was a little harsh.
I'd say it was a penalty, if I'm being honest. His arm was well away from his body. Usually I'm an advocate for not giving these soft pennies, but his arm was away, so...
I mean, fair. And again, given the current rules, I don't disagree. I just think it's a little challenging when he's trying to come out of the box and Martinelli kind of scoops it up. And yeah, okay, fine. But you get the penalty. I think the penalty obviously is a huge moment in the game. Most people, myself included, even being quite worried watching the game, would think, well, you put this away, you regain control. You probably, West Ham probably devoid of any kind of optimism and kind of momentum at that point, and you put this away. But there is something about Saka's penalties which always leave me a little concerned. I don't necessarily think he's got the best technique. And if you watch the penalty, I don't want to go too kind of deep into it. But whereas the penalty at home to Liverpool and some of the other penalties, he tends to kind of wrap his foot around low and hard. Here, he kind of sends it with his instep, and all of us have played football. And when he sends it with his instep, it actually spins out before it spins in, if that makes sense. And that's what sent it a couple of yards wide. And look, ultimately, is that pressure? Yes. There's no two ways about it. That is pressure, but that, I don't think that necessarily means the lad has bottled it. I just mean it's a pressurized situation. Everyone recognizes that moment for what it is. There afterwards, obviously, West Ham got the equaliser. I don't think Arsenal could have done too much. I know there was a little bit of talk about it's a simple ball back in, but if you actually look at the header clearance from, I think it was Gabriel, or I can't remember the defender, but he got quite a lot of height and distance on it. Kera, I think, sends it back in. I think it was Kera, and Bowen with a great finish. Some talk about Ramsdale could have done a bit better, but the only reason why I wouldn't be too harsh on Ramsdale there is I think when the ball's coming from high to low, it's actually quite difficult to sight it quickly in terms of making sure you get a proper contact. I think it's different when the angle of the ball, let's say, is consistent in terms of the pass and the finish. I think the fact that it's come out from the sky, I think it's a little difficult to kind of get a firm hand when Bowen did strike it quite well.
Into the ground, to be fair. So
And-
the
and
bounce was...
the bounce, a little bit of spin. I mean, he got a decent hand. Of course, he'd probably be disappointed being a top class goalkeeper, but I think I wouldn't be too harsh on him. I think that's difficult from close range. Thereutafterwards, I think what you want to see from Arsenal is the ability to kind of grind their way back into the game and get a winner. They had a great opportunity with Jesus from the Tierney cutback. I think if Jesus doesn't necessarily narrow the angle towards the near post, he probably slides in and makes that 3-2. But thereafterwards, I think what you saw from Arsenal was this inability to create the same patterns of play and the kind of the identity that they have, which is, play it through the middle, get it wide, work certain situations where you really pen the team in. And I think that's probably the disappointing thing for me, which is that there you could clearly see there was this kind of edginess to their play. Not enough players perhaps taking ownership of the situation. So look, they've not been in this position before, and in the end, they couldn't quite find that third goal. And in the end, Antonio, if he puts that header away from a tight angle, they could have even lost the game, similar to the game at Anfield. So look, it's a game, it's 2 points, definitely the very definition of throwing 2 points away, because they were absolutely dominant in that first 15-20. And for whatever reason, and I think Arteta's alluded to it, they dropped their intensity in terms of that commitment to want to score those kind of additional goals. So look, in the end, from a result perspective, difficult. I'm sure we'll probably come around to it and discuss what that means for their kind of hopes of landing their Premier League trophy. But I think as a game, it's difficult to see this anything other than a potential turning point for their hopes going into the remainder of the Premier League games.
I mean, if this is game week 3, game week 4, they win the game. Same with Liverpool. I think if that was early on in the season, they would have carried on the way they were playing. The ascendancy would have carried on. I think what it is, I mean, you perhaps sort of said it's not pressure, but I think it is the pressure of the situation. I think they start off exactly the way they've been playing all season, but now when they go to Wob, I think they start being conservative, thinking, right, we're in a position now where we don't want to lose the game, we don't want to draw the game, and I think subconsciously they retreat into themselves, and I think that's the problem. I think this is where, if you've won championships in the past, there is a mindset, because you're used to being in the situation. I think this is where the problem was always going to be. I think the Liverpool result, in my opinion, certainly was pivotal. I think that was very, very important. I think dropping those points was going to have an impact. And this game against West Ham, exactly the same. They start off like a house on fire. And then, again, they just put the brakes on. And I think they're not going to be able to recover. I think now the ascendancy is one with Man City. I said it actually after the result against Liverpool, that this now makes Man City the favourites. I certainly think Man City are the favourites now. If I was a betting man, I'm putting my houses on Man City. Absolutely. I think Man City will be tremendously confident. They'll be buoyed by the results of Arsenal. They're not going to slow down. They're a machine. They're just going to carry on winning. I think the last 2 weekends have perhaps decided where the title's going.
No, you might be right in your estimation there as well, but I feel for Arsenal, like there was I wouldn't say they had any nerves going into this game or the Liverpool game. Well, at least they didn't show it. They played some brilliant stuff again in the first half hour of each game, and then, like you guys have said, they just take their foot off the pedal, and it seems like once they do that, they can't get back to the level where they were at. It is difficult. It's a game of momentum. But that's where, if you're going to win championships and titles, you have got to see the job through. No matter how well you're playing, you've got to be killers. You've got to make sure you kill that game off and get all the points achievable, because especially when you got someone like City on your tail who aren't slipping up anytime soon, you've got to be on it, and these are the kind of games where you have to win. 3 points are a must. For West Ham, fantastic result for them. Gets them a slight gap from the rest of the bottom 3. I believe they're like 2-3 actually maybe more, maybe about 4 or 5 points clear of the bottom.
Four clear with a game in hand.
4 clear with a game in hand from the bottom. So a huge result, a huge point for them at this point in the season, especially being 2 down, as we've stated. But for you, Uwais, what do you think then? How do you think this is going to impact their title run? And do you think it's still in Arsenal's hands, or are City firm favourites now to win the thing?
Well, as the old cliche goes, I think Mikel Arteta's got a big job on his hands now. Regardless of what a manager says and does on the training pitch, the players feel what they feel. Ultimately, having, as you rightly points out, they will feel given up 4 points in the title race. You could imagine a situation where if they'd managed to beat Liverpool, you could probably think if they beat Liverpool, they'd probably beat West Ham, because some of those scars, let's say, from Anfield can reappear where you become a little bit conservative, as you rightly point out. I think in the end, I think Man City are firm favourites, but there is a pathway for Arsenal still. And I think that's the way, I think Gary Neville articulated it quite well. And I'm firmly of the same belief, which is if you want to win a Premier League title, ultimately you are going to have difficult results along the way. Man City last year, I remember just second to last game of the season, Mahrez blazes that penalty over at West Ham, 2-2, puts themselves in a difficult position. Going into the last game, they're losing 2-0 at home. Ultimately, setbacks are going to come, whether that's in-game or losing the overall games or in the run-up to kind of the final games. Setbacks are going to happen. And where Arsenal, where I would hope the mindset is that they've built themselves, they've played well enough over 30 Premier League games to give themselves a chance where if they have dropped points in games where perhaps they shouldn't have, they've still built themselves enough of a buffer to recover. And that's what you get from being so consistent at the start of the season. They've led this Premier League in the end from the start all the way until this point, really. I think they only relinquished it at one point recently when Man City played first or what have you. But in the end, I think the way I see it is their pathway to kind of achieving title glory ultimately is they have to beat Southampton on Friday. I think that goes without saying. That's fairly obvious. They have to recover. I think they have to win, and they have to win well, I believe. I think it cannot be a scratchy game and a scratchy performance. Some may argue that results is all that matters, and I would agree, but I think just given the way the last 2 games have gone, I think they need a resounding performance, ideally a clean sheet at home, to go into that blockbuster game the following Wednesday against Man City. Their pathway is clear, I believe. I think they have to get Zinchenko and Saliba back somehow. It's no coincidence that arguably one of the best defenders in the league this season, Saliba, him missing the game at Anfield, him missing the game at West Ham. Yes, you might get away with that for some weeks, but at some point that pressure, that drop-off in quality, Holding's been good, let me be very clear, but that drop-off in quality at some point is going to tell. And obviously they were missing Zinchenko against West Ham. In the end, they need those players fit. Ideally, they need those players definitely fit for the Etihad game. I think they have to beat Southampton, and they absolutely have to avoid defeat at the Etihad Stadium. If they beat Southampton and if they lose against Man City, I don't believe they can win the title, simply because that would mean Man City could afford at least one more draw elsewhere, and Arsenal would have to win out, and Man City would still win on goal difference, and their goal difference will be superior. There's no scenario where both teams finish level on points and Man City relinquish the title to Arsenal. So if Arsenal lose to Man City at Man City after having beaten Southampton, hopefully, I think their title hunt ends there at Wednesday evening, because I don't see Man City. I could see them potentially drawing another game, because funny things happen in games. Could they lose another game? I don't see it. And given that they'd have enough of a buffer to draw, I think that would be sufficient. I think from an Arsenal perspective, they've got to try and go there and get a draw. If they win, of course, that really puts them in the box seat. But I think a draw would still put them with an opportunity going into other big games for sure. But that would give them the confidence to think there's only a certain number of games. They finish off away to Forest, home to Wolves, with those difficult games in between. Yes, Brighton, Chelsea and Newcastle, but in the end, they just simply need to recover on Friday, and then they have the opportunity for one game, one big performance against this monster of a football team. And in the end, if you want to achieve big things and big titles, you can't shy away from these challenges.
No, absolutely, you can't. There are some concerning signs. with Gabriel going down for the penalty, like.
Mhm.
Listen, Lucas Paqueta did throw himself to the ground in theatrical fashion. You could say it wasn't a penalty, but the fact that Gabriel has gone flying in like that, it's just stupidity, and there's no need for it. And that is, again, they don't start the game with nerves, but then as the game goes on, you can feel they get a bit twitchy. And same goes for Saka's penalty. Like those are kind of things you just can't afford to miss, and it has a domino effect from Gabriel's side to Saka, and it's these kind of signs which lead me to believe that even if Arsenal were to beat City at Etihad, I still think City could win the league from there. Arsenal have shown in these past few weeks they have tendencies to slip up or not capitalise when they need to. And they've got, like you said, Brighton, Newcastle, teams of this nature that are still fighting for top 4 places. They've still got them to play. So it's a hard running for them. If City beat Newcastle at Etihad, I think that's then done. I don't see Arsenal being able to come back from that mentally. I think it'll break them. And City won't slow down either after that. If anything, their momentum will continue. So it's worrying. It's worrying. It's still in Arsenal's hands, in my opinion. I still feel like if you want to become champions, you've got to win. And it doesn't matter who's up in front of you. You've got to beat everyone. So you got to beat everyone in your way. And they're at that stage now where they've just got to take it one game at a time. Even though it is City at Etihad, they've just got to show some character and show they want to win this title. They've got the capability. They've got all the players. They've got their style of football. Everything's in place for them to beat them. They've just got to go out and do it, whether they can or not.
Yeah, just to put a bow on this conversation, you're right. If you remember, we spoke about it in the last episode. 2011, 2012, Man City chasing down that first title against an impressive Manchester United outfit, and then 3-4 games to go, Vincent Kompany with that big goal. Yes, they were home, but they hadn't done it before, and there was talk, are they going to be able to do it? And I repeat, I remember the hype going into that game. I can't remember many games with a hype like that in Premier League history, at least that I can remember. Midweek game, maybe Monday, but I'm not sure. I'd have to double check. But yeah, that's to your point. They need ideally their best 11 in that game against City. Again, don't want to overlook Southampton, but they have to go into that game ideally with their best 11 and produce a performance of a lifetime to try and keep their hopes alive.
And again, a blockbuster midweek game, which I'm sure everyone is just licking their lips at. I thought I'm watching that. That's going to be an amazing game. But before we get to
just another game to me.
Before we get to that, dearie me, Leeds United. Ayub, what is going on, buddy? We've 5-1 the game before, 6-1 against Liverpool, and I was giving Leeds some hope before this. I was like, you know what, they might be able to get a result because we know what Liverpool are like at the moment as well. But dearie me, it's I don't know what's going on. I'll let you take over.
There's that famous scene. Sorry, Ayub, just before you go, there's that famous scene with Monday Night Football when I don't know if it was Dave Jones. I think it might have been Ed Chamberlain when Gary Neville returns back from Valencia to Sky Sports, and he asks him the question about something along the lines of where did it all go wrong, and all you see is Carragher making himself comfortable, putting his feet on the table, saying, "I've been waiting months for this." So let's just say I've been waiting hours for this. But take it away, Ayub. The floor's yours.
I mean, I've never been one to wax lyrical about Leeds United over the last couple of seasons, because this has been 2 years in the making. This is not something which is new. It's not just something which has suddenly happened. Anybody who follows me on Twitter will be aware of the tweets that I put out, and I'm very, very critical. I mean, I sometimes maybe overcritical, but it's based on what I see in front of me. I think there's been a dereliction of duty from the owners. I think the owners been woeful. They've made a few decisions which have been right. One of the biggest decisions they got right was appointing Bielsa, which is the reason why we're in the Premier League. But apart from that, there's been very, very few good decisions made by the chairman, the CEO, and the director of football. And as I said, yesterday wasn't a surprise to me. I knew we were going to lose. This is the sad thing about supporting Leeds United Football Club, that there is a certain predictability about this. I said the result against Crystal Palace wasn't just a freak result, as Patrick Bamford alluded to. He was just very nonchalant about it, saying this is just a bad day at the office. I thought there was much more to it than that. The Liverpool result, I think, testifies to that. And again, we started okay. First 15, 20 minutes, we were okay. We were in the battle. And then a decision goes against us. And there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that is a goal that should have been chalked off. There is no question about it. This is what my annoyance is with VAR, and it's biased towards the bigger clubs. Liverpool fans might come back to me and say, no, they've got quite a few rough decisions. But certainly from Leeds United's point of view, we get nothing at all. That should never have stood.
They gained. Yeah, you're right. They gained a massive advantage from that because it leads to the goal. But apparently, it was too far back in the move for it to be checked, and there were a lot of factors that could have changed by the time the ball hit the back of the net. So it's bizarre to me. But sorry.
I mean, I put it the other way. If that was Leeds, that goal is chalked off. I'm absolutely convinced that goal is chalked off, and straight away. The fragility of these players, the absolute weakness. As soon as that goal goes in, it's a different game. Straight away. Liverpool have not been playing well. They've not won in, was it 5 games? Start zipping the ball around. Initially, when I saw the lineup, I saw Henderson, Fabinho and Jones in the middle of the park. And I actually thought, maybe this gives us slight hope. Not with Leeds United. As soon as that goal went in, it was one-way traffic. We pulled a goal back in the second half, but even then, I knew that the characters that we have are weak. Every single character that was on that park for Leeds United is a weak character, which is not what you need. As soon as it became 3-1, I was expecting exactly what happened, and it just became a procession. It could have been more. I mean, it was 6. It was embarrassing as it is, but it could have been more. But as I said at the start, this has been 2 years in the making. This is not something which has just happened overnight. We've bought players. I don't know what due diligence Victor Orta does, but it's absolutely awful. We've bought players, Christensen, right back. There are championship right backs who are better than Christensen. We've loaned out Cody Drama, who is actually probably the club's best right back, to Luton, and he's making tremendous waves at Luton. Luton are in the playoffs at the moment. We've got a centre back, Charlie Cresswell, an old-fashioned centre back. He's 2021, but he's old school. He puts his head where people dare not put their feet. He's been out injured twice by getting kicked in the head. Millwall fans have been absolutely raving about him. So we've got 2 players that would add value to this current side and would give backbone. This is the problem with this football club. I don't know what type of decision making or what type of characters we have at the top, but certainly in terms of decision making, it's woeful, absolutely woeful. We've got people that are on probably £1 million a year. How are they still in the job? Victor Orta, how on earth he is still in his job is beyond me. We talked about, I think briefly, JKA. 40 million on a player who's played about 50 minutes. We've signed Rutter from Hoffenheim. Before he came, there was doubt because he certainly isn't a goal scorer. Assists wise, he's sort of not pulling up any trees. We're buying for 35 million. We've bought Robin Koch. We've bought Junior Firpo. We've got Pascal Strike, who admittedly has come through the ranks, albeit somebody that we've bought for the future. But now he's a rabbit in the headlights. That's the type of defenders that we have at this moment in time. So a lot of mistakes made by this football club. I actually thought, after the result yesterday, that maybe relegation won't be such a bad thing. Maybe this is what this club deserves. And maybe it gives an opportunity for a reset. Much in the same way that Burnley have completely thrown away Dyche's philosophy. There's a new philosophy, new culture at Burnley, and look what they've done. So perhaps, it may not be too bad a thing. I mean, I'd be absolutely distraught and gutted After 16 years in the Championship, it's not what I want to do, not what I want to go back to. But it almost sort of feels that the players have given up. There's absolutely no fight in the players at all. I find it absolutely disgraceful. It's shameful. I mean, it's a sort of same. I almost sort of feel I'm repeating myself after the Crystal Palace game. Grazia seems to be clueless at the moment. It seems to be when they go in at half time, whatever he says actually makes them play worse. So I'm worried about Grazia. The players.
Well, it's funny you say that, because you actually pulled the goal back straight after half time, and you'd think that would be the perfect platform to then push on and then potentially claw the game back. But
superb
the brittleness, but the brittleness in these players for it to happen 2 weeks in a row, or 2 games in a row, I should say, is very concerning. Like, that mindset, especially when you're down there, you want more fight, you want more resiliency, but they're showing that they just fold, and I'm not surprised you're the way you are at the minute.
Yeah.
Because
I'm resigned to the fact. I am absolutely resigned to the fact that it's a case of the inevitable. The inevitable is that Leeds United Football Club will be relegated. I think Forest and Southampton will be other teams. I've just got a feeling that Leicester might just string a few results. And would you believe it? They'll be absolutely chomping at the bit to play us in a couple of weeks, because they know that that's where their survival will depend on, because they will beat us. So I'm just completely demoralised. And we did a lot of fans did what they did against Crystal Palace. They walked out of the ground, and again, rightly so. If that's what the players are doing, then really it will be almost an embarrassment for the fans to stay and be subjected to that nonsense, that garbage, that rubbish. And he brings on Nonto again. I mean, we talked about Rutter being brought on when they're 5-1 down. The game's done and dusted, and he brings Nonto on. And Nonto's got a maybe. I mean, I'm perhaps not reading his look right, but he almost had that look of, "You're joking? What do you reckon I'm going to be able to do now?" And I'm not sure. I mean, there's been some rumours of disquiet in the dressing room, so I'm not sure whether that's true. Sometimes when you're in a bad run, a lot of stories come out, but it feels like a team that's not pulling in the same direction. It feels like a team that's not pulling at all. So I'm past the stage of being worried. I'm sort of resigned to the fact that we will be playing Championship football again next season, which is and it's all on the owner. I mean, I've posted tweets in 2019 criticising this owner, and it's borne true. I've never thought that this owner had the club, or at least a strategy to move this club forward, and it's proven to be the case, because it's poor decision after poor decision. Occasionally, there's a decent acquisition. Rafinha, who kept us up last season, Bielsa, who brought us up and had that fantastic first season, but thereafter it's been shambolic, and I'm absolutely furious. I'm furious because it's something that could have been prevented, should have been prevented, but unfortunately, because of a lack of care and attention by the owners and by the board, we find ourselves in a position where we're going to be relegated. So I can't say anymore. I can't say anymore. I've said too much as it is.
Yeah, I was going to say, tell us how you really feel. But yeah, just very quickly, look, I think you make some great points, Ayub, and I think if I was a supporter of a football club fighting to stay in the big league, I'd probably be incredibly worried at the state of Leeds right now as well. Back to back, crushing home defeats, conceding 11 goals in the process is not the kind of momentum you want to take into big matches, playing against teams that are fighting with you at the bottom of the table like you have right now. Yes, you've got Fulham away next, but you've then, I think, got Bournemouth at home and then Leicester at home. Huge games. Bournemouth may already feel like they've got enough points and one more win might just do it for them. But Leeds, that home to Leicester game, really kind of looms large, as you say. And I know what you're saying about Leicester may well be chomping at the bit, but I think I think Leicester have their own issues right now. They're not necessarily looking all that lively, regardless of a resurgent half an hour at the Etihad over the weekend. I think they're in a world of trouble themselves. I think just in terms of the game, just very quickly, far be it for me to try and get you to relive the game, but you're right, they started really well. They had a set piece early doors. We saw this against Palace, actually, where you can see that they've worked on some offensive set pieces. You'd probably argue I'd like to work on some defensive set pieces from time to time as well. But offensively, it was really well worked with the dummy run and then the kind of second run from Rodrigo. And he really could and should have made better contact, you feel. Definitely could have put you into a goal lead. You're right. Thereafter the game became quite scrappy, I thought, until the first goal. There was not much quality on show from both sides. That first goal, of course, pivotal. It's a debatable decision. I don't disagree with you. I think there's this, once Firpo's had what looks like a slightly heavy touch, I think thereafterwards, Arnold does close the angle quickly, and I think he's slightly getting his arm ready in case the ball hits him in the face or somewhere. I think it's a slight reactionary measure, as you would do as you kind of start closing the space. I think Firpo's he can't be trying to play that through anyway.
No,
you've got to be looking to get rid of that early doors against what is still a good team in Liverpool. But yeah, thereafterwards, obviously they've got the goal there. I thought Arnold did well to run on the outside to create the overlap. That was quite smart. But I think from a Leeds perspective, once you go 2-0 down straight afterwards, again, they show this against Palace, that kind of worse ability, that really bad ability to concede one and concede the second one kind of straight afterwards. Lovely goal in the second half from Sinisterra. I thought probably arguably the toughest goalkeeper to beat in a one-on-one situation in Alisson, and I thought he scooped it.
David De Gea, but continue.
He scooped it, I thought, really well. And you're right, you think, okay, this is going to give us a little bit of hope. And one of the guys you mentioned, and I don't want to dwell on it too much, but Pascal Struijk for that third goal. I mean, I don't understand when it's a normal throw on the halfway line why you come in and how he misses the ball. And I think this is to your point where you've got individual errors at the back. There's no flick, there's nothing. He's just simply missed the ball, and he's coming at a rate of knots, I think, to kind of close in on Gakpo. Jones picks up the ball, one pass, lovely through ball. You could question Mellier's positioning. I'm not sure where he was, and he was then trying to close the gap. Lovely finish by Jota. And thereafter the game's pretty much done and dusted. I think that what I would say moving forward is they're not in the kind of form that gives you any real confidence. And just before maybe Badge provides his thoughts, I just wanted to throw it back to you. You currently sit outside the relegation 3 at the bottom. I mean, none of the other 3 are showing. Everton had a poor performance at home to Fulham. None of the other 3 are necessarily showing. I thought United should have beaten Forest even more comfortably in terms of the dominance that they showed. It could well be a case of, well, I'm not saying you'll get through simply by not getting any more points. I think you're going to need some points, but I'd like to think. But I just wonder whether just kind of being outside of the relegation zone now just gives you that little bit of a buffer where you feel like 1, maybe 2 great performances might well be enough, because the teams below you are not necessarily showing any signs of pulling up any trees. What do you think?
Well, a consensus of thought amongst most Leeds fans is forget us actually performing and getting results, because that's not going to happen. It's what's happening at the bottom. The game. I mean, we talked about the behemoth game, Man City versus Arsenal. At the bottom, it's going to be Leeds versus Leicester. I've got a feeling that will define who goes down. I think the winner, I mean, Everton might just scrape away, and I think it's going to be between us and Leicester. And I think whoever wins that game will survive. So that's going to be a monumental game. But I don't think we're going to play ourselves out of trouble. We're more dependent on trying to sort of hope there are 3 worse teams than us in the league, which is what we did last year. We just about got away with it last year. This year, you can only tempt fate so much. I think we've pushed our luck. I'm not at all optimistic at all. As I said, I've thrown in the towel. I've completely accepted the inevitable because because I've based it on what I see week in, week out. And I've based it certainly on the spirit that the players have shown, and they have shown no spirit at all. Absolutely no spirit at all.
I think that's the biggest concern for you, is the fact that your first 2 goals yesterday, both were errors. Junior Firpo should have cleared his lines. He's trying to be too cute with it. Regardless of whether it's a handball or not, he set himself up for failure there. And then Weston McKennie losing it in the middle, and Liverpool ruthlessly counter-attacking. And I stopped watching it at 2 because I was like, I know a drubbing when I see a drubbing.
Well, yeah. I mean, you stopped watching. Leeds stopped playing at 2-0. And just on the point of Meslier, in terms, I mean, I'm just going to go through. I think I read somewhere that out of the 11 shots on goal, or the last 11 shots on goal, he's conceded 10. He's a player now. He's played over 100 games. He's still a young man, but he started talking about maybe looking for a move elsewhere. So I think his mind's not at Leeds. We've got Christensen at the back, who I think would not make it as a championship right back. We've got Robin Koch, who perhaps would be maybe in some.
I was going to suggest that we bring the all right back if you want.
Don't even go there. We've got a really good one at Luton. So I mean, I alluded to obviously the fact that we've got some decent players out on loan, but I'm not going to add anything more because it's depressing talking about a team that just as they seem not to care, the players.
Again, I think your saving grace is the fact that you've got Leicester, Wolves, and Palace and Everton playing each other this weekend, and it probably will suit Leeds to get away from Elland Road after 2 absolute drubbings at home. So I think they won't feel the crowd as much being on their backs. So maybe you may be able to pull a result out. Fulham hadn't won a game in 5 games up until this weekend, so that's always a great sign going into that game. But
you guys, you're trying to offer me hope.
No, but I think the worry is that Gracia came in and offered some initial signs of hope where you thought, all right, okay, this is perhaps going to work. And yet with games Palace and Liverpool, I think the game against Liverpool you can lose, but there's ways to lose. And what I think Leeds, what you desperately want to see in the next games is this kind of ability, that commitment to try and keep a clean sheet. And I always feel Leeds have enough energy to get opportunities on the counter attack and score goals. It feels like they're not committed enough, that kind of over my dead body attitude to say we're going to try and keep a clean sheet. And that just means simply 2 banks of 4, working hard, doubling up on opposition wingers, keeping spaces tight. I genuinely believe half this league is not necessarily good enough consistently to break down 2 banks of 4. And you'll always get opportunities on the counter if you've got pace, which I would argue Leeds do have in abundance with Somerville and Sinistera, and if Nonto can get back in and make waves, and Rodrigo and Aronson's energy. So I just feel like they're suited, I believe. You might argue some of those players are quite too offensive-minded, but I do believe if they can have that, hey guys, we're keeping a clean sheet to that type of attitude, quite often good opportunities will come off the back of that, and I just feel that that's what they need after 11.
I laugh at that only because if you look at the Premier League, the team that's considered the most goals is Leeds, 60 goals. So it's obviously proved something incredibly difficult as to how they suddenly sort of do something that they're incapable of doing. I have no idea. I'd go the other way. I'd just say, sod it. Let's just see if we can score more goals than the opposition. Let's go Bielsa.
Because that's been working really well recently. Yes. Yep.
No, but since Grazia's been here, he's been much more pragmatic, and he's tried to play in quite a measured fashion. Mm-hmm. But when you've got rubbish, such crap as we have, you can probably do it for sort of 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But at the end, if you've got a turd who's a centre back, he's got to be exposed. And this is what's happening. Our right back, he doesn't know what he's doing. Left back doesn't know what he's doing. So in a sense, you cannot teach defence and how to defend to people that are incapable of defending. So you might as well go the other way. We've got maybe okay offensive players. Let's do it that way. Let's see if we can score 8 goals, because we'll probably concede 7.
You know what? You might not be wrong there, because if you've not shown any signs of the fact that you guys can defend like resolutely, so you might as well go on the offensive and try outscore your opponents, which I feel like with some of your creative output up front you may be able to do. But
I like how we simply just write off the inability to account for 50% of the game. They can't defend, so let's just try and score a goal. It's only half of the game, but okay, that's fine.
I mean, if you just watch, obviously you have, you've seen players that really, they should be nowhere near the Premier League. The back four that we had yesterday, that should be nowhere near the Premier League. And as I said there's a couple in there that would struggle in Championship football. That's how poor we are. But let's move on. I mean,
we're moving on. Before we move
very
on,
painful.
Before we move on to our Champions League topic, I'd be remiss to not mention what happened in the top four race with Spurs and Newcastle both slipping up and Manchester United capitalising on their win against Forest. Again, a win I'm sure as a Leeds fan you're kind of happy with, but not that happy with. So it was.
I'll take anything at this moment in time.
No, it was a great performance from United, especially after two shaky results prior to that. For Newcastle, absolute drubbing from Unai Emery's Villa, who are playing some magnificent things at the moment. They're only 3 points behind Tottenham as it stands. That is the kind of run they've been on.
Just on that point, I mean, I talked about the dereliction of duty by Leeds, the board. Somebody posted a table of, do you know when Gerrard was sacked? And when Unai Emery took over? It will be interesting. We were actually, I think we were just above them. But it just shows, if you make a decision at the right time, in terms of changing managers, how beneficial it can be. A lot of clubs always wait until maybe it's too late. I think that's what we've done. But just shows. And I think what Emery has done is fantastic. But I applaud the board. Sometimes a board gets a bad rap. Sometimes you've got to give credit where it's due. And I think Aston Villa, perfect. Got rid of Gerrard. Knew that was never going to work. Brought in somebody who they knew perhaps could sort the team out. So fantastic work from Villa.
To be fair, as much as it was timing, it was also the quality of manager they've managed to pull in. Like, I was very surprised when I heard Emery was going to Villa, because I still think he's a top class coach. And the job he's done, I believe no one's won any more points. I think he's won the most points in the league since he's arrived, which is incredible. And the job he's done on the players, the way he's improved them, Ollie Watkins, making him watch videos of Cavani and Baka, improving his running, so he's not just headless, like keeping him within the width of the box.
Yep.
Fantastic stuff, and the general improvement you've seen in all the players and throughout the side, it's a great job done by Emery. And honestly, the proof's in the pudding. They are 3 off Tottenham for a European spot.
Well, we spoke about it on the last episode, didn't we? And I earmarked those 2 games, the Villa home to Newcastle and Brighton away to Chelsea, as 2 teams that were outsiders for the top for the 4th spot. And if either of them had any real designs on getting that 4th spot, they probably both needed to win, and they both did. So it definitely sets them up to really have a good, strong finish to the season. You'd still say they probably outsiders to get the 4th spot, but they've definitely put themselves in a better position than before the weekend. And especially when you look at, obviously that was probably Newcastle's worst performance of the season, a deserved victory for Aston Villa, probably should have won by more. But with Spurs not necessarily showing any real form, you do feel like as though that 4th spot could still be available and could still be open if either of those teams, Brighton and Villa especially, could string a few more wins together, which, to be fair, given their current performances, they both look like they'll probably win more games than they lose.
Yeah, with Brighton, they've got 2 games in hand on Spurs and a game in hand on Newcastle. But the problem is, at this point in the season, you want points on the board, because depending on how that FA Cup semi-final goes, may factor into the rest of their season. So it's all to play for, and we've got some exciting few weeks ahead. Switching over to the Champions League, Chelsea, Real Madrid. Now, you boys were, I wouldn't say you were, you're kind of optimistic that Chelsea may get through. I, for one, I like how I'm pointing this out, by the way. I just want to be, there's no subtlety here. I, for one, want to remind you that I was of the opinion that they've got no chance, and I still believe they have no chance, especially after the performance on the weekend against Brighton. Brighton, that could have been anything. Brighton played them off the park, and if it wasn't for Kepa, that could have been a ridiculous and humiliating defeat at home for Chelsea. So going into the Real Madrid game at the Bridge, do you boys still believe there is hope in that game for Chelsea? I'm going to go ahead and say there isn't. And I know you should say never, but I'm gonna go ahead and say never. But for you guys, do you still think there's a chance?
I do. I'll quickly just go first on this, Ayub, if that's okay. I mean, yeah, I do. I do think they've still got some hope. I can't really point to anything tangible to suggest why. It's just there were certain instances in that game where I felt that although Real Madrid deserved to win, let's be very clear, and they were for the most part a class apart from Chelsea, there were just certain situations in the game where I felt as though Chelsea could have made more of certain situations. Now, Stamford Bridge, slightly tighter pitch, at home, buoyed by the home crowd. Of course, their form right now doesn't point to anything other than another Real Madrid victory. Chelsea, in their last 9 home games in the league since the turn of the year, they've drawn or lost 7. So again, not necessarily going into this with any kind of real hope. And you alluded to it, Badge, over the weekend, another deserved loss at home. Even when they got their kind of noses in front through that deflected goal from Gallagher, Brighton were well worth their 3 points. And you can see one team full of confidence, understanding their patterns of play, understanding how to build attacks. Mitoma, unbelievable development of him, especially in the second half of the season. Probably too late to get into the team of the season, but in terms of his talent and what he does,
he's been nominated, by the way.
He's been nominated, absolutely. So I think just in terms of just what Brighton can offer, they were deserved victors. And I think from a Chelsea perspective, you had more negative news coming after the game. I say negative regarding the kind of it coming out that Todd Bowley was in the dressing room and he's been in the dressing room after all the games. And look, in the end, he's the owner alongside obviously other kind of investors, and he's the owner. And if you own something, whether it's a house or a car, you get to do with it as you wish. That's the fundamental right. So, but I think it's just a certain. I think from a PR perspective, and it is open season against Chelsea right now, and I understand that, so I don't want to be too harsh, but I think it just comes across the way it's portrayed in the media as Todd Bowley in the dressing room after the Brighton game apparently called one high-profile player an embarrassment. I mean, whether that's true or not is anybody's guess, but it just is a continuation of the latest developments at Stamford Bridge where things have obviously been, it's a lost season for them in many ways, but do I have hope? I mean, Real Madrid at the weekend won away from home at Cadiz. They rested a number of star players. Vinicius Jr., Cruz didn't even make the squad because they were carrying knocks. But I think Modric, Carvajal, Alaba were on the bench. Some of them required in the game. They're well rested. They'll feel very, very confident of coming to Stamford Bridge and not just seeing this through, but showing their class and winning the game. It's obviously being played today. I don't have Chelsea going through. After having said all of that, I'm predicting a 1-1 on the night with Real Madrid going through on aggregate. But I do think if they can get a goal early, funnier things have happened, as Real Madrid will testify through their amazing run last season. So that's where I stand.
I'm only saying it because as a father, it would be rude and not to back a team that my son supports. So I'm just doing it purely as a father. In terms of reality, they're going to get smashed.
I'll cut that out in the edit. Don't worry about it. No, I just don't see what they've not shown anything tangible, and I know what you mean. And trust me, I've seen it in my life where they don't have to be playing well to get a result tonight, but they're playing Real Madrid, so I think I don't need to say any more on that point. Moving on, we have City away at Bayern Munich. Now they're coasting right now, 3-0 lead, go into the Allianz. Is there any hope for Bayern to turn this around? I was going to give my thoughts, but I've just realised that I'm not sure myself, so go for it.
Well, I called it, I think, on the last podcast. City are the champions of Europe. They're going to win the Champions League. End of. I'm not going to say any more.
I think it's a tough mountain. Yeah, I think it's a tough mountain to climb for Bayern Munich. You saw the fallout after the first leg with the whole situation surrounding Sadio Mane and Leroy Sané. A fine issued against Sadio Mane of £260,000. I think Sané was sporting a bruised lip at the weekend. So it's clear. I think they'll have put that somewhat to bed, you'd hope, in readiness for this second leg. But Mane's obviously had a tough season, not scored any goals since October, and there's some talk that Bayern Munich will look to offload him in the summer. At the weekend, they drew 1-1. And if it wasn't for a 97th minute equaliser by Stuttgart, Dortmund would have also won, which would have meant they would have been level on points. But with a 3-3 draw for Dortmund away from home, Bayern is still holding on to a slender 2-point lead at the top of the Bundesliga. So I still feel they'll probably have enough in the Bundesliga to see that through and win the German league title. But from a City perspective, I think they've won their last 10 on the bounce. Scoring plenty of goals, attacking for fun, creating plenty of opportunities, looking pretty solid at the back. In the type of form Man City are at, it's difficult to see them losing on the night regardless, never mind losing over 2 legs. I fancy a 2-2 draw. I think Bayern will have to come out and play, but I do fancy...
Hey, I put down a 2-2 draw as well. Nice.
Wise man.
Nice. Yeah, and all that. I think it's a bridge too far for Bayern. 3-0's it's too much of a deficit to claw back, especially with the form of Haaland, Grealish, etc. I could name the whole side if I want. Just they're too good at the moment, and they've got too much. I feel they got too much for Bayern for any potential surprise there. Moving on to the next game, we have Napoli AC Milan. Now this is the game. This is the game right here. This is the one that's anybody's to win. Napoli got a comeback and win at home after a 1-0 loss to AC in the first leg. This is one game I cannot predict. I just don't know how to call it because they've got Osimhen back, which is a huge boost for Napoli. However, they have lost Kim Min-jae, and they don't have Zambo and Gisa as well, which are 2 integral parts of their spine. So it's going to be interesting to see. Napoli have the potential to blow them out of the water. They really do. But then, as we've seen with Milan, they've got a familiarity with Napoli, which works for them. They know how to play against them. They've proven in the past few weeks that they know how to beat them. Whether they can scrap a 1-0 or they can smash them 4-0, it's no problem for them. So this one's a really intriguing one for me. I wish I could give a prediction. I might give a prediction, actually.
You can just say it. It's easy.
I don't want to go against Milan because I love Milan, but I do think Napoli will potentially edge it by a goal. I don't know what score, but I think they'll go through just by a goal. I think for the neutral, I think given how the rest of the competition, the teams that are going to be left, you're probably going to want Napoli to go through and progress. But it's a tough one to call. I don't know about what you guys think of it.
Yeah, I think the Napoli AC Milan game is the one to watch, isn't it? I mean, the others you could make the argument. Real Madrid, Manchester City, and Inter Milan strong favourites to make the semi-finals. It'd be a surprise if the other teams were to able to reverse those first legs. This is the game to watch, and this is the game ever since the draw was done. To your point about what Thierry Henry said, I thought the same. That when the bracket came out, it'll be really interesting. Napoli were everyone's kind of European darlings. Everybody loved watching them play. They had that obviously famous performance against Liverpool as well. But it's a case of everyone's kind of favourite second team, or they're an outsider, want to keep an eye on. And now when the bracket came out as it did, they were favourites, and that shifts. We spoke about pressure in the first segment. There's a certain pressure that comes with that, where everyone says, well, Napoli should be in the final. They can come through Inter, AC, and Benfica. So this is the game to watch. In terms of predictions, as you mentioned, Osimhen's back, so that's a huge boost for Napoli. A lot of pressure on that young man, but I'm going to slightly hedge my bets. I'm going to suggest that if if Napoli score first, I think they'll see the job through in extra time, maybe even penalties. I think if AC Milan score first, I think they'll win the game and they'll win the tie. I think just because I think there's the reason I say that, I just think there's going to be certain nerves in that game. AC Milan, if they score first, they'll feel confident about that game they played a couple of weeks ago. I think if Napoli score first, they'll feel confident enough to see the job through. So definitely the game to watch, I think, over the 2 days.
Definitely. I don't know if this interests you. Are you giving your?
I don't give a rat's backside about the Milan Napoli game.
You should be watching games like this. It's a nice tonic.
I'm researching the championship at this moment in time. You've got first world problems.
Hey, this is a great palate cleanser for you, mate. You get to see some great football, great goals. And a bit of drama. Why not? And like you said, our final game was Benfica. Benfica down at home 2-0 to them in the first leg. I don't see them being able to reverse that. I do think it will be a close game tonight, but I don't think they'll reverse it. And I see Inter going through to the semis. So, yeah, all to play for again. It's good to see that there'll be 2 Italian sides in the semi-finals. It's been a while, I think, since that last happened. I don't have a fact checker with me, Lewis. I wish.
Well, I'm just thinking you've put the mockers on Inter Milan because you've just said 2 Italian teams in the semi-finals. So guaranteed Benfica turn that one around now. But yeah.
Hey, if Milan are going through, Inter ain't going through. That's how I see it. But no, and that is a wrap, guys. Thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Just Onside. Remember to like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. Hit the bell for our next video, a notification for our next video. We're hoping to record on Thursday, I believe. We will have the video released by Friday. At least that is the hope. I'm sure we'll talk about the Champions League fallout and hopefully Europa League progression. And also we've got it's an interesting time of the season, fellas. We've got a team of the season nominees out. I'm not sure when we'll be covering it, but I do look forward to seeing if what our team of the seasons are, and where we differ in our opinion. I'm sure Ailing will be making Ayub's.
But shall we do a worst team of the season as well? Just put the Leeds 11.
But yeah, I'm excited to bring that for you guys.
Just one final point from my side. I think interesting topics today, especially with the Arsenal result at the weekend, as well as the Leeds result yesterday. So it'll be good if the viewers can give us their thoughts, what they think in terms of whether Arsenal if they've now lost their opportunity to go for the title, and if they think that Leeds are doomed. But it would be interesting. Just please leave a comment down below.
Yeah, and let us know your thoughts. But yeah, guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us, Ayub, Uwais. And that's been this episode of Just Onside. We will catch you on the next one. And in the meantime, don't stray off.